Hi, I'm Robert Reich, and I want to talk to you today about a basic economic principle, and that is that government ought to tax what we want to discourage, and government should not tax what we want to encourage. For example, if we wanted less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we should tax carbon polluters. But on the other hand, if we want more students from lower income families to be able to afford college, we should not put a tax on student loans. Not a very hard principle to understand, is it? In fact, it's fairly simple. But unfortunately, congressional Republicans seem intent on doing exactly the opposite. Earlier this year, the Republican-led House passed a bill pegging student loan interest rates to the yield on the 10-year Treasury note, plus 2.5 percentage points. Republicans estimate that this would bring in around $3.7 billion of extra revenue over 10 years, which would help pay down the federal debt. In other words, this is a tax, a revenue enhancer, and it's one that hits lower and moderate income students and their families hardest. Republicans claim, by the way, that the president's plan is almost the same as theirs. Not true. Obama's plan for student loans would lead to lower rates, limit repayments to 10% of a borrower's discretionary income, and fix the rate for the life of the loan. Now, meanwhile, a growing number of Republicans have signed a pledge sponsored by the multi-billionaire Koch Brothers political organization called Americans for Prosperity, to oppose any climate change legislation that might raise government revenues by taxing polluters. Officially known as the No Climate Tax Pledge, its signers promise to, and I'm quoting now, oppose any legislation relating to climate change that includes a net increase in government revenue, unquote. By now, 411 current office holders nationwide have signed on, including the entire GOP House leadership, a third of the members of the House as a whole, and a quarter of U.S. senators. The New Yorker's Jane Meyer reports that 2 successive efforts to control greenhouse gas emissions by implementing cap-and-trade energy bills have died in the Senate, the latter specifically targeted by the Koch brothers' Americans for Prosperity. So here's the question. Why are Republicans willing to impose a tax on students and not on polluters? Don't look for high principle here. Big private banks stand to make a bundle on student loans if rates on government loans are raised. They've thrown their money at both parties, but been particularly generous to the Republicans. A 2012 report by the nonpartisan Public Campaign shows that since 2000, the student loan industry has spent more than $50 million on lobbying, and most of that has gone to Republicans. Meanwhile, the Koch brothers, whose companies are among America's worst air polluters, according to Forbes magazine, have long been intent on blocking a carbon tax or a cap-and-trade system, which would cut into their profits. And they, too, have been donating most generously to Republicans to do their bidding. Now, look, we should be taxing polluters and not taxing students. The GOP has it backwards. And why does it have it backwards? Because its patrons want it that way. Thanks.